After a while, Lien left the environment filled with shouting and disgusting selfishness. Now, he was in a warm place and welcomed with kindness. Zhang took him to meet the students. Lien then spoke with the two girls and heard from Karen that life here was very enjoyable. The cheerful girl said that she had been happier in the past few days than in her entire previous life. Lien was unsure whether he could admit it to himself, but he also wanted to leave those people behind and live for himself. His desire was growing, and he could no longer deny it. As a result, Lien started to cry, and they shared their feelings together. After that, Lien asked Karen and Ken to speak with Zhang Yi on his behalf. Ken was certain that Zhang Yi would not refuse Lien because of his great abilities. However, Ken reminded him that there was one absolute rule in the bunker: anyone who joined must be ready to follow his orders. Lien felt embarrassed and asked what exactly that meant. Did everyone in this place have to obey all orders without question? He was ashamed and hoped that with 4 women already living in the house, Zhang Yi did not intend to add him as the 5th member of his room. Shinsen told Lien that he was definitely mistaken. Since Karen and she arrived here, Zhang Yi had never shown any inappropriate behavior toward them. The one with impure thoughts was Lien himself. So, Shinsen explained that their big brother was not a depraved predator. On the contrary, he was an honorable man, and all he needed from them was their strength. If that was the case, Lien declared that he was ready to follow all orders. A few moments later, a vehicle approached the bunker. Before long, Shinsen greeted Zhang Yi at the front door. He was surely curious about why Lien was there at that moment. So, Shinsen explained the situation and why the woman was now in the bunker. The two of them discussed how Zhang Yi's plan had worked perfectly. Lien was furious with his students and had decided to request to stay in the bunker. Now, they just had to wait for him to formally ask and accept the terms. Zhang Yi then asked the men to wait in another room because he had something important to discuss with Lien. Karen served drinks for them, and then the 3 of them began their meeting. Lien felt embarrassed because he didn't know Zhang Yi's real intentions in having him stay in the group. Because of that, Shinsen started acting and asked if Lien could stay with them in this house. Zhang Yi said that it didn't make sense. Lien had students to take care of. He wouldn't want to stay here, right? It wasn't that Zhang Yi was against Lien staying, but Lien remembered that Zhang Yi had only invited him once. After he refused, saying he had to take care of his students, Zhang Yi never asked again. Now, with a determined gaze, the woman thought that if she could be useful, she might get a second chance to stay here. Karen served a special drink to her leader and then gave her opinion. She said that the students were only taking advantage of Lien's kindness and did not deserve his dedication. Lien then explained that Zhang Yi should let him help his students grow and learn to survive out there. He would follow all the rules and orders of this place. He would do any job and meet any demands. Zhang Yi said that he accepted Lien staying here, but he was not sure if Lien would truly follow all the necessary orders. Lien started trembling and said that he would obey. However, there were limits he could not cross. Zhang Yi then said that Lien was a kind and sincere woman. That was a good quality, but at the same time, it was also a weakness. One day, there might be a need to take an innocent life to protect the base and its people. Would Lien be willing to do it? Lien realized that such a situation could happen. He said that if it was necessary, he would do it. But if it was just to satisfy someone's evil desires, he would not. Shinsen, a peace lover, agreed. Their big brother did not kill unless provoked. Lien also agreed with that but emphasized that he would never harm those close to him. Zhang Yi smiled and said that was obvious. Of course, he would not be so cruel as to ask them to kill their loved ones. That was his rule for everyone. However, with a dark expression, Zhang Yi told himself that such matters were his responsibility alone. Zhang Yi also believed that in a post-apocalyptic world, deaths due to accidents were normal. Furthermore, he was certain that his women would support him in eliminating those who posed a threat. They sealed the deal with a handshake, making Lien officially part of Zhang Yi's family. Lien felt relieved, knowing that he could still help his ungrateful students while staying in this comfortable place. Shinsen knew that her teacher was naive. Soon, those foolish students would bring destruction upon themselves. Zhang and Yang Mai went to see the new recruit and announced that they would throw a party to celebrate his joining the team. Yang Mai said that if Lien had a favorite food, he could request it. With so much excitement, Lien was overwhelmed by feelings he couldn't explain. However, the truth was that the 2 leading women now realized there was another woman in Zhang Yi's harem. Zhang Yi warned that there would be a meeting with the other members, and Lien must attend. He explained that it was a war meeting, where urgent matters would be decided. This didn't mean there would be a new war. However, Zhang Yi explained that they had discovered another military base, and those people were clearly their enemies. Lien understood that this was bound to happen. With the fall of a powerful base, a power vacuum was created, and others would definitely try to seize control of the territory. Coincidentally, Shinsen had new information to share about the Shirshan base. Zhang Yi gathered the whole team, and after that, he would share the new information with everyone. At the moment, they were very comfortable with everything. However, new enemies were approaching, and another confrontation was inevitable. Shinsen then revealed the existence of 3 other strong bases, shocking those who were unaware of them. After some time, they began discussing the situation. The first of the 4 major locations they knew of was Yangshan Base. This area was rich in oil and fuel. The leader of this base, Xiaohong Lian, had fire abilities, while her assistant, Zhuge King Tuang, had wind powers. Next was Chaoyu Base, which controlled all the ships in the city. Zhang Yi was curious whether sailing was still possible in such weather. Shinsen explained that only the surface layer of the ocean was frozen. Since it was impossible for the entire sea and ocean to freeze completely, ships could still be used. Zhang Yi wondered if, since the sea wasn't entirely frozen, anyone with a boat could take advantage of it for fishing. Shinsen confirmed that this was true, and this base had great potential in seafood production. However, she further explained that boats required a lot of fuel, so people from this area had to come to the city to get more supplies. Zhang Yi realized that the soldiers he had killed before had likely come from this base. Lastly, there was Kingpo Base, ruled by Sing Tian, who had a very strange ability. He could enhance the strength of those around him. However, his face was unknown, and very little information was available about his territory. Shinsen felt slightly pessimistic, stating that in this apocalyptic era, large factions rarely clashed openly or revealed their special abilities. Zhang Yi felt that this was already predictable, thinking to himself that these people would certainly not reveal their powers unless absolutely necessary. This happened because as long as there was a struggle for power and resources in Tanhai, the leaders of the bases would be extremely cautious not to be overthrown. Shinsen continued explaining that each base had its own characteristics. What distinguished the Shirshan base was the great strength of its army. The Yongsan base had energy resources, the Chaoyu base controlled maritime transportation, and the Kingsing base focused on metal production. The other bases did not have large armies, only individuals with special abilities. Among them, the Shirshan base, which they had defeated, was the strongest of all. After finishing her explanation, Shinsen noticed that everyone felt relieved because the threats posed by these enemies were not greater than those they had already faced. Even Zhang Yi, who was usually cautious, began to feel more relaxed. However, Lian was still curious about the 4th force that Shinsen had mentioned. It turned out that Shinsen had only mentioned 3. The girl in the wheelchair then explained that there was a group called the Snow Worshippers. The leader of this group had the ability to turn people into mutants. The sect leader claimed to be Bai, the reincarnation of ice, and insisted that everyone must join him to be saved because he was the chosen one. The influence of this group was growing rapidly, to the point where the Shirshan base considered them a threat. Zhang Yi began to think about the potential rise of a religious army whose entire members were mutants, which would undoubtedly be a major problem. He wanted to hear the opinions of others on this matter, but no one immediately responded. Finally, Zhang Yi asked Pamanu, a military veteran. The veteran said that they must always be prepared to face the greatest danger. The first step was to build the strongest possible defense. Pamanu suggested that they use the weapons they had obtained to prepare for any attacks. Zhang Yi agreed that they should focus on building a solid defense. Chunlei, who was also concerned, supported the idea of focusing on fortifications. Zhang Yi then asked for Karen's opinion, and she expressed that they needed to continue searching for stronger building materials for their defense. If they left now while the other territories had not yet advanced, they would not encounter enemies from other bases. Zhang Yi agreed with Karen's view that they needed to leave immediately to gather more materials. Shinsen wanted to hear her teacher's opinion, as he seemed very anxious. Shinsen told her teacher not to panic and took the Shirshan base as an example. Even though their strongest base was here, they couldn't explore and control the entire territory. Because of this, the other bases couldn't expand their territories either or risk losing their forces since they had fewer soldiers. Based on this, they still had a lot of time to explore and gather more resources available in the city. Lian explained that building defenses was important, but they had to use this time to collect more resources first. Chunlei asked if her teacher agreed, and Lian replied that she was worried about her students' safety if an attack occurred. Zhang Yi thought to himself that if an attack did happen, the village where Lian's students lived would be the first place to be destroyed. Lian asked if her students could help in building defenses. However, Zhang Yi then questioned what they could contribute if they couldn't even fish in a place where fish were the only available resource. This was a reality that even Lian herself couldn't deny. To comfort their new member, Zhang Yi said that if something happened, he would find a solution. He added that if danger arose, he would allow Lien's students to stay in the shelter temporarily. Everyone who heard this was stunned. They were once not even friends, but now Lien was part of the family. If she wanted to help her students, then he would protect them. These words moved Lien to tears. Zhang Yi told her that she didn't need to thank him, as it was the least he could do. Lien then realized that all this time, she had misinterpreted everything. Zhang Yi was a good person, even though he might seem ruthless when faced with threats from outsiders. Zhang Yi then decided that their priority was to build defenses. Meanwhile, he and Karen would go search for the special materials needed for construction. After the meeting, Yokier announced that Lien's welcome dinner was ready. Shinsen smiled, seeing her teacher so excited. Lien devoured the meal so eagerly that her stomach couldn't handle much food. Yokier commented that she had been eating poorly, so her stomach couldn't handle too much meat. In the end, Lien was taken to rest because she had eaten too much. This good life felt like heaven to the teacher. After dinner, Zhang Yi called Karen and asked her to come closer. He noticed that Karen didn't seem happy during the meeting. Karen said it was nothing, but Zhang Yi pinched her head lightly and told her not to hide anything from him because now they were family. Karen gathered her courage and asked why Zhang Yi was willing to accept those wicked students. He must have known how they had treated Shinsen and her at the academy. Zhang Yi then calmed Karen down and explained that this was part of his plan. Before any attack occurred, those devils would gather and starve to death. Karen's eyes lit up, realizing that her brother was very clever and never disappointed her. Zhang Yi then said that this must remain a secret, and they must not discuss it at home. Karen now looked happier than ever and went to retrieve the list of materials needed for construction. Zhang Yi knew that he could only control his group members for now. The only thing left was to see how their enemies would act. The next day, Karen showed the location where she wanted the materials to be placed. Zhang Yi helped move the materials to the designated location, while Liang cut them into the desired shapes. Pamanyu lifted the beams and metal walls. They worked hard together. From a distance in the village, two people were whispering inside an empty house. Realizing the opportunity, they were delighted. However, someone was watching them curiously, wondering what they were up to. What were they planning? And what did they want? As they drew closer, the mystery deepened.